and start recording again. So this will be the third session or segment for today. I am going to do some sketching. Let's see how it... Where do I have my map? I seem to have lost my map. I'm just going to have to blather about a little bit. I had a Google Street View pulled up to use as a reference, but it seems to have disappeared. Well, I know where I want to be, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So here we are. So, what kind of things do we want to have in a sketch drawing? I'm going to call my first layer rough, and this is actually, for once, it's going to be exactly what it says on the tin. Maybe use a nice blue color. Maybe use the soft pencil for this. So this is going to be the actual rough outline. Blocking out what do we actually have in the image. That's the horizon line over there. There's some rocks here. There is a straight. Here we are. Not really the best tool to rotate with. There's a right-click menu that lets you rotate much easier. The problem is that at least I haven't found a good way to pan with that. So I usually just end up moving my hand over to the keyboard and mouse so that I can use the middle button to pan. My current tablet does not actually have any special functions, buttons, that sort of thing. What it has is, of course, the normal click. Then there are two buttons. One click is undo. That's extremely necessary. And then the other one is right click. Right click brings up context menus or the color wheel that I hope you are seeing. You shouldn't see any, file dialogues or things like that, to avoid doxing myself. But I haven't done that good of a job learning exactly what you see and what you don't. So I'm never quite sure what you get and what is hidden from you. So here we have some rocks. A pedestrian crossing. Center line for the cars here. This needs to curve a lot more than I had drawn it curving. You are not supposed to see file dialogs. The question is whether you see the color wheel. So right now I have a color wheel up. This is a tool that I can use to rotate my canvas, and it has some of the brushes that I can quickly pick from, and it has a color wheel that I can select. Yeah, all right. So that one is visible. That's something that I do like you seeing. So next step, there's a bit of a side road here. Here's another top tip for when you are sketching or otherwise drawing aggressively. Just break things up. Think of it as hello watching. Thank you. Glad to be back. You can just think of where something that curves, simplify it. It probably doesn't. You can imagine it having facets again. So like instead of drawing something like this, you would break it up into some amount of facets, and then drawing the facets in three-dimensional space is much easier than drawing a curve. And you can always, draw it again as a curve when you have plenty of time to do it. So if you are not in a hurry, I would always suggest breaking things up. And the vanishing here is not coming across particularly well. I'll have to, rework it once the rough portion is more or less finished. Maybe I think all of this has to curve a lot more aggressively. So that's going to be more or less the foreground. There's some, not really buildings, not really fences, something in between. Like the wall up here. Then I'm going to rough in another layer. This is a curving beach. Something like this. And it goes on for quite a while. I think that's the airport is going to be somewhere back there, but whether the airport is visible on this image, I don't know. You have a sort of, the city area coming like this. This is going to be something that I will have to, suggest. Suggesting buildings is something that I am not particularly good at, but we'll manage somehow. So, and then I am going to use a darkish purple to mark in some of the mountains back there. So if you think of those old platformer games with parallax scrolling, that's what's happening here. So there's things that are further in the background, and I am differentiating between them already at this stage, although I'm not detailing any of them at all. And then I am going to have a skies, blue skies. Let's use sort of a darkish aquamarine for it. It's going to be some, some clouds in the sky. And then finally, there is going to be a character here. Actually, I'm going to make this a group as well. So what do we have here? So standing, sitting. I'm going to zoom in on the corner here and do some thinking. So going to be a kind of a sun hat. Or maybe something like this, holding the hat a bit. Another hand somewhere around here. That's too far down, I think. We want the chest to be somewhere around here. So the arms are actually pointed relatively far up. And then I want some degree of leaning on the background. So I imagine some of you can guess what kind of a character this is going to be. And it would have to be around somewhere around here. You know, leaning on the fence. I'm going to try not to work too hard on the actual drawing, so that I can demonstrate the layer inheritance and selection systems. But as I am sure you all know, I am almost pathologically incapable of actually speed drawing. So we'll see how it turns out. So what we have here, I think it's been some years since I was at this place, so I can't actually remember how high this fence is, but I am going to, you know, just decide that shoulder level is going to be somewhere around here. And she is going to be leaning back a little bit, you know, sort of sitting on the edge between the wall and the fence. Somewhere around here. You might notice that I'm drawing these sort of, you know, scratchy bounding boxes. This is, again, a topic that I want to discuss in more detail at another time. This is the way that I currently use to force myself to have not necessarily correct perspective, but at least have it more or less moving in the correct direction. So I will build up these scratchy things, and they're supposed to have the sort of volume that that the character will have. So I want to have around the middle of this, and then moving forward, it's going to land somewhere around here. And then the I want the legs, the lower legs, turned a little bit back, but not massively. So I think something like this. Maybe have the other one, do a bit of a dynamic pose. The other leg is more straight. And then you end up with the foot somewhere around here, and then you can again, just raise it as a box. And you have some semblance of volume that you can use to sketch in the foot. And the other one is going to be a little bit crossed here. My computer fans are going wild again. I hope this is not particularly audible to you. And then there's going to be, some wind blowing, that kind of thing. So that's more or less the rough here. Going to save again. What do we want to do next? I'm going to start with the start a group background and start a subgroup inside the background for sketch. And I'm going to check down the opacity on the rough so that I can still more or less see where it is. And the sketch is basically going to be, let's say, the same thing, but a bit more detailed. So at this point, I am going to actually try to draw in everything that I want to have visible. And get the angles more or less correct. There's some because these are rocks, the edge between them and the landscape, or the bit that you walk on, sidewalk, is not exactly, perfectly straight. So I'm going to make these scribbly lines here. Then work myself up the rock here. I started out drawing it just straight up and down, which it is actually not. But anyway, I would be surprised if anyone actually identified this location by the we'll have the drawing in vanishing points and things like that is not actually going to be that easy, because the rock is not actually a very systematic structure. You can sort of use something like this to help you get a feeling for the volume of it, I think, but how much this actually helps when you are just sketching in, I don't actually know. I'm actually going to add in, ideally I would have added these helping lines on this extra layer, but this is fine too. This is not going to be a final layer in any case. And Peko to you too, Duroxing. So that's the rocks are going to be something like that. Then I am going to let's use a green color for the trees. There's some bushes coming out of from behind some of these rocks, and then there's a very weak and sickly tree growing out of the cliff here. I am going to again draw like a cube here that I will then use as a volume model for when I actually sketch in the tree. Now, some of you might say that if you are going to sketch in cubes, then it's no longer a sketch. I'm not familiar with the nomenclature in this topic, but that might well be the case. And there's this tree is actually relatively large, but it is hidden behind the rocks. It is growing out of somewhere higher up. If you feel that drawing, aggressively like this is difficult for you, I think doing gesture drawing might help you with it. I had the feeling that doing a lot of gesture drawing helped me draw very aggressively. And another thing was only using pencil for a while. I think it's probably not the the feeling of the pencil that made it seem helpful, but probably the fact that I could not erase any of my drawing. So I think that what actually had the positive effect was probably not being able to erase. So if you want to have that sort of experience, you might well get it in digital drawing as well, as long as you just decide that you aren't going to be able to use the eraser for a while. something like this. And then the center line. The center line is going to have to be a little bit up of the visual center. Of course, I guess the easiest or most methodical way would be to use this sort of imagining yourself as a camera. So this is extremely slightly above parallel, I think. And in any case, if you want to get into doing this kind of angle, playing with the thinking about the angles, it's probably a good idea to actually use the line tool and not freehand them. Well, anyway, I did draw this thing slightly above the visual center. If it's not correct, then we just had a bit of bad luck. For those possibly watching me to actually learn to draw or something like that, I would also recommend try not to be afraid of mistakes. Just confidently do things wrong, and when you do things confidently wrong, you will be able to tell that you have made a mistake. And once you are able to look at your mistakes without cringing, you will also be able to correct your mistakes because you can identify what you did wrong. If you just wishy-washy your drawing, there isn't any definite mistake, so it's not quite right. It's not really right. It's not really wrong. So you don't know what to change. So be bold, make a big mistake, then you will be able to see what the mistake was. So here I'm going to use some brown for the beach here. There's going to be some amount of buildings, but largely not in the mountains. The buildings are going to be concentrated on the coastline here. Then we have the I'm going to switch to a little bit more of a green for the first layer of mountains. And again, this is something that you might want to think of as volumes. If you think of this as having sort of a triangle cross section here, you will better be able to think of what sort of contours the landscape would have here. Of course, ideally, if your name was Ilya Repin and you had 10 years to work on your piece, you would not be doing this kind of rough blocking. You would actually be looking up some geological information and decide what kind of rock this is, and maybe if you're drawing a metamorphic rock, you would actually start out with some drawing some sediments and then thinking about how they would behave when you deform them. But as you can tell, my name is not Ilya I am not, I'm nowhere near skilled enough to even try doing that sort of thing. So it doesn't really matter. Second mountain range. And again, let's give it some volume. And then throw in some details. Sort of ink it. You can use some of the hard pencil type of brushes for what usually gets called inking, although of course in this case you would not actually be using, well, in any case when you are drawing digitally you are not going to be using any sort of ink. But it doesn't have to be a hard black aesthetic for your inking. Again, let's give the cloud some volume here. Another one of those topics where if you are going to take 10 years to finish a drawing and your name is Ilya you might look up some, actual information about clouds and what kind of, formations they do, what kind of clouds you have at different weathers. So this is supposed to be, a nice sunny atmosphere. So I'm just sort of drawing clouds that vaguely resemble the clouds that I see in this Street View image. If you were drawing from imagination, you'd think of, you want a storm scene, so you would look up what kind of clouds appear when it's stormy, and that sort of thing. I sometimes start on projects where I do that, but as you can guess, the problem is that those kinds of projects have a relatively low chance of being actually ever finished. Here I have already gone into, drawing a simplified skeleton, as I always do. Another one of those things that when you just draw enough of them over a long period of time, you gain this surprising ability to just, draw them without thinking about it that much. So practice makes perfect. So there's going to be some rotation here. The important part to remember, again, as always with forearms, is that the major bone does not move. the one that attaches to the middle of the elbow and to the inside of the wrist. That one does not move, so you can use that as a hard point. Question is, I'm miming out this pose with my hands. So the inside of the wrist is on the inside of the hand here in both cases. So you end up with this bone going like this. And the other bone attaches itself to the outside of the elbow. And these ones are now going to be behind this one. So there's some rotation there, but you can't really see it. If there was no rotation, it would be somewhere around here. And on the other sides, so if there was no rotation, it would be here. And it's moving back. So it's basically the same, just mirrored. Yeah. So something like this. And then you have the hand here. The thumbs are going to be on the outside. And the fingers are, of course, going to be on the middle. So that's looking all right. And then let's move into the legs. I am taking I was about to put the pen in my mouth, as I usually do. But if I want to talk at the same time, that's not going to work. I'm taking, finger measurements that I want this length and this length to be the same. Of course, in perspective, that's a little bit harder, but doesn't have to be perfect for now. And then I would like to have this be the same as well. It's getting into some, character design questions here. The thing is that the character that I am sure all of you already have identified actually has, obscenely long legs. Absurdly so. I have long legs myself personally, but she has legs that are not, to my knowledge, at all possible for human beings. Yeah, I guess like a fashion figure, a clamp character, that sort of thing. Mm. So that's an all right, rough foot there. The kneecap is going to be around here. So the proportions that I have given her are, a bit less extreme than the canonical character design is, but still very long legs. something like this. I think this is, I think the rotation here is a bit too much, but let's leave that as one of those, bold errors. So, next question, how is the neck going to be? I think I want, sort of looking up from down at the camera, that sort of thing. Since I'm going to end up moving it, I'm going to draw this in the bottom layer. So this is the sketch layer of the sketch layer. As is typical of me, so that I can just cut some of that and push it around without messing anything else up. Yeah, that's going to be good enough. And then let's get back to the... Actually, let's keep on, drawing in some of the, planes of the face. Now, turns out that if you use the middle mouse button, you can immediately take a color reference. And my mouse roller is apparently a bit dirty. I should take it apart and clean it up, but I've been too lazy. Like a domino mask, classic bank robber. Then there's a nose. And jaw. If you use this method to, sketch a face, it ends up looking like a JoJo character. So I think you could probably use that as like a, knowingly make a... drawing a JoJo character would be your method of sketching something up. I think at this point I'm going to have to actually, move the arms around a little bit, since it seems that the brim is going to be a bit elsewhere than I had originally anticipated. But this is the kind of thing that you can easily change when you are still at this level. So that's another good reason to sketch a lot. And then we might want to have some, indication of what kind of clothes she'd be wearing. So, sundress. is another place where thinking about the volume is going to be helpful. So if the wind is blowing in this way, probably the cloth is also going to drape, something like this. And of course it's going to stay up where it's ballooned by the legs, and then under the legs it's going to move in the other, be able to move more. And then let's do a little bit of work on the I'm going to add a layer so that I don't mess this one up when I'm working on the wall here. So I'm going to sort of sketch in these blocks again with a bit of volume so that I don't entirely mess myself up. And we are going to, I think we're going to have, if I'm going to abstract it like this, I am going to have to add some more fence posts than I otherwise would have, which is not a huge problem. How do we want this? This is starting to look more or less good. Then there's another piece of wall here. Again, I am going to abstract it into these smaller segments, although in the photo it is a small stone wall, so it's going to be more curved than something made out of concrete blocks or something like that. I'm going to take some artistic license and just, draw in some landscape here, since I don't actually want to deal with whatever that is in the photo, some sort of, halfway construction. You would like to have the blocks here getting progressively shorter and thinner as you are moving further away from the camera. I don't really have a good method for that, so I just do something. Feels like it more or less works. So this is going to be the actual sketch. We can switch off the rough. So there's relatively little has actually changed. Then the well, really the sketch should not be in the background. It should be outside of the background. So the first group of the background is going to be the sky. I'm going to find a nice, relatively bright. Seems fine. And then I am going to fill it. At this point, I'm going to have to put the sketch on top. So we have a base color layer for the sky. And the sky has this tendency of I'm going to put on the layer inheritance, but it doesn't matter since this layer is, not actually bounded by anything. Airbrush. The sky tends to be somewhat lighter and brighter in the direction of the horizon. Hmm. That's probably going to be relatively good for the sky. Then we are going to want the mountains behind. And I'm actually going to use some of the, paintbrush, paintbrushes for this. Hmm. Or maybe not. Maybe a ink brush. Hmm. Now the thing is that you would actually like to have a relatively, well controlled border for something that you are going to be using as a coloring mask. Now I'm going to white it in aggressively, and then fill it. No, that was not successful. There's a gap somewhere, probably here. And then I am going to sort of soft erase around the lines. You get this sort of a fade-in effect without it being too, airbrushed and plastic looking. So now we actually have a an inheritance layer. So what kind of a color would we like to have for the mountains in the back? Well, we are going to have some amount of green. They are a sort of natural environment to an extent. You might notice that I am using an airbrush with a relatively low opacity, so that means that it's not replacing the color that is already there. It is adding to it. So when you are doing soft shading, this is often a good idea, so that you can, that's the point of airbrushing, that you can make relatively mild changes. And at this point, I would like to have an ink layer. I am going to use a sort of a dark brown, a bit darker. Seems fine. So the mountains behind, somewhere around here. And actually I'm going to use my outline inline system again, because I am going to have the internal line work, a little bit more muted, that you might be able to notice that they are there, but they are not jumping up at you like actual ink work or stark black and white change here would be. And of course, if you want to, you can have some layer inheritance inside this area, and then you can make them single lines either darker or lighter depending on what you need at that point. Like I can make this one a little bit darker, but make these ones a little bit lighter since they are in a lighter context. So if they are too dark, they will stand up more than you might want to. So that's going to be the mountains behind. Then we are going to have city. And this is going to include the mountains in the foreground. until the beach. And then let's fill. And then erase a little bit. Unfortunately, this isn't really a project that would find a lot of use in the layer masks. Once we get to the character, that will become more useful. So that seems like a fairly good whiteout. So now on to drawing. One moment. I forgot my atmospheric haze. I think I want the atmospheric haze to affect all of this. So I'm going to group it and then position the haze above it with layer inheritance. And exactly, in this case, it will affect the line art and the colors. And atmospheric haze is usually sort of bluish. That's probably going to be good enough for now. The point is to have a contrast with the mountains in the foreground. We are again going to find some sort of a darkish green. No, just dark green, all of it. We're going to change it anyway, change it up anyway. Let's start adding some, lighter green to the forest here. And then some browns. Mm. And then start using a sort of a gray for the beach here, beach and the city. This is a stony beach, so it's not actually going to be a nice, sand yellow under any circumstances. It's pretty gray. And I think having a sort of a sandstone color to the town is probably going to be, let's say, in our interests. It's maybe a bit, reversed from what you might imagine a beachside city being like. We have here some, sandstone-colored building construction going on and weakening out in this direction here. And the city is going to get deeper as we approach the valley here. I think at this point we can start adding some lines to it. Actually, I'm going to group both the outline and inline, and that way I can just start out with a black outline, and then I can change up the colors in it. So by this point, this has taken me an hour and a half, I think. I'm currently looking at my reference image and not really my OBS. So I don't know if we can talk about a sketch anymore, but I am sure that this is perfectly within the acceptable limits of a sketch. Because if you wanted to do an excellent job of drawing something like this, it would be one of those, 10-year projects for people named Ilya Repin. That I am unfortunately not, and every time that I've started one of those huge projects, it has actually ended up never working out that well. So here I am using another kind of, parallax thing. I've got this scratchy but blocky outline that I am using to suggest a constructed environment. I'm not actually drawing any buildings here, but it sort of gives the vague impression that this is not a natural environment. And then let's try to draw the beach. The beach is actually relatively thin. It's for a known tourist destination, this is not that great of a beach, honestly. There. So I think at this point I'm going to have to start sort of shading. I'm going to put in some sort of erase away the the city color from the hills here. The way that I did it, it's actually not going to be possible to actually erase it, which is a shame. But there's always some sort of a workaround for it. So then we would like some, sandstone color, but darker. And I am putting shadows sort of behind the outline layers, so that it sort of vaguely looks like they're shadows from the buildings in front of them. Doesn't really look like that, but giving a vague impression is good enough for our purposes. When you zoom out, it looks sort of all right. What we are going to need is some vertical inlines. Again, sort of trying to use the draw the as you tick in some things weaker and closer to each other in the background than in the foreground. Seems about right. And then I am going to add the inheritance layers for the colors. And the outline color for the city is going to be sort of, brownish, as you can expect. The outline color for the forested area is going to be more sort of greenish. And I think I'm going to need some outlines in here. After all, I did have some plants. Again, the usual trick of making them weaker and closer to each other as you get further away from the camera. And then airbrush these into more of dark green color. And then we have the outlines of the forested area. I'm going to turn these into a very dark an extremely dark green. Don't worry, Admiral. If anything, I should be worried that I'm not doing much of a job, streaming, since I'm mostly not really entertaining anyone. I am mostly just working. So there's the inline is now a sort of a bluish. The outline is now a sort of a bluish gray. Probably going to be relatively good contrast with the sea. And then I want sort of a sandstone color for the extremely weak sandstone gray color for the beach. So this is starting to look pretty nice. And again, I think I'm going to have to group these ones to get my layer inheritance for the atmospheric haze. This is going to be sort of a light blue again. But not that strong. Seems fine. So the atmospheric haze is stronger the further away we are from the camera. So I've put more of it up here and less of it down here. So there we have the city done. I think the next next natural step would be. Oh no! Now it's outside. No, this is an unused paint layer. I think this is going to be the foreground, and the last one is going to be the sea. The sea is going to have to go between the sky and the mountains. But let's work on the foreground first. So now I am going to log in some white again. And here you are able to see that the layers further down in the background were actually partially covered up by the blocking of the foreground. And because we do have this blocking layer, that doesn't matter. It's not a problem at all. The magic of digital art. I think I'm going to have a sort of a special case for this for the fence, because it's a bit more involved than just having a flat color to it. So this seems like a nice This is actually the foreground is going to be a bit more detailed than before. So I think I am going to actually make use of the selection masks at already at this level. At this point, I'm going to have to use the oh, I hope I saved recently. The nope, it's working. It was just extremely heavy for. I think this might be too much for my computer. Yeah, it's trying to find some sort of a outline. I'm going to use Bezier Curves instead. The previous tool, the magnetic selection, is one of those, semi-automatic things. This is here you are working by hand, but using this sort of vector function. I would have liked to try the semi-automatic system out, see if it works with this kind of line art, but doesn't seem like such a particularly good idea. So now I have a selection mask for only this area. Actually, I am going to make it an element of this layer, and this layer is going to be the rock. So now I will be able to just work on this layer without having to think about any of the other things. I would like to have a sort of rock color. Okay, let's just go. So then we would like some highlights. The sun is coming sort of from the left here. So we would like, highlights around where the rock is actually protruding. And we would like it to be dark under the tray here, for example. And sort of try to give the impression that there's, facets to these rocks that are getting a little bit less sunlight. Now we smudge them a bit with a larger, more neutral brush, since there isn't actually going to be that much, massive shadow other than under the rock there. Along the edges here, going to be nice area to have some light in. Then we actually do need some green here. Some sort of a green outcropping I've sketched in here, and we need a smaller brush here. So then we need some highlights. Some highlights again. Maybe a little bit smaller. The highlights are going to be more, you know, things like leaves that are pointing more towards the sun than not. I'm trying to do some lining here. You might notice that I am lining this as an outline, despite the fact that it is technically an inline. The area towards the middle. Oh, you mean the part where the cars are driving the other way around, or something like that? Ah, a classic mistake. Speaking of driving cars and mistakes, the absolute weirdest thing I've ever seen on the road was on a ring road. For those of you who do not live in medieval cities, um, most cities that used to have a wall around them had these walls torn down in the 1800s and were replaced with, you know, nice boulevards. They might have a, you know, a park running around the edge of the town, that kind of thing. Well, um, I was driving on the ring road once, and there was something really weird going on. There's actually, I'm going to sketch this up somewhere here in another layer. Okay, we've got the road, and you've got an entrance to a private parking lot. And somehow there were 3 cars like this, perpendicular to the road. What kind of a series of events led to this? I have no idea. I only arrived once there were already 3 cars one after another across the road. But they somehow managed to jiggle themselves into and out of the parking lot while I was making distressed hand signals in my car. I also have no idea how that kind of thing happens. It's a mystery. And of course, the part about the ring road comes in the way that a road that used to be at a city wall is going to be pretty tight, so you don't actually have much space to be turning around like a lunatic. But somehow these three people managed. I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't know how they managed to do this. But that is absolutely by far the most absurd thing that I have run into in straight traffic. So then we need some inlines. I'm going to use the inlines to actually put in, some texture on the trace here. And I am doing a bit of a trick here. I am actually going to add my inlines based on what sort of weird bullshit I airbrushed in as the color here. That's not going to make it look amazing, but it is going to look a bit better. We are still within the inlines, so this is going to be the inlines of the trace here. I wonder if there's a more idiomatic English expression for these so-called inlines. I've noticed that in Indian English, where they love to use this sort of, Indian Englishisms that are formed, like they are formationally valid, so there's nothing grammatically wrong with them. But the thing is that nobody outside of India uses them. Like something like prepone as opposed to postpone, for example, makes perfect sense. You can see why. You can immediately see what they mean. And I don't think there's an idiomatic expression for that in actual English-speaking countries. Here I took the inlines a bit weaker everywhere, and now I was strengthening them up again a little bit. I think particularly the ones that are in the shadow are going to need to be a little bit darker, so that they, have the desired amount of contrast with their background. Not too much, not too little. Probably relatively good. Now I'm going to add in some green to the, not that much, a bit darker. All of the bushes here. Then again a little bit darker. I think it seems to be, at least for me, easier to really dial it back first and then start walking it back up. Probably a cultural thing. The prepone, postpone? I imagine it's, I only noticed the comment now. I think there's probably a comparable amount of need for an expression for moving something forward in a schedule. But it might well be that there's a pair of opposites like this in some Indian language that they are pulling these expressions out of. Let's turn off the sketch. It's not looking amazing, but well, good enough for now. This is a demonstration anyway. Hello Pig. Happy New Year. I imagine it's already evening for you. Oh yes, evening. Yeah, prepone makes a lot of sense. It seems like the kind of expression that you would actually need. All right, then the next section I'm going to select. I'm not managing to select for some reason. Don't know what's up with the selection here. I have my whiteout selected, so in principle I should be able to select a portion here. Tool options. I have intersect selection. I should have replace selection. So now when I click here, it selects everything here. So as my next move, I want to select the subtract option. Did not work as I had hoped. I wanted to run a Boolean operation to remove the area of the other area from this area. Oh, well, I mean, it's lying on top of it, so I think I can just color in this layer without paying any heed. I am going to make this gray again. Hello Tabaha. invert and intersect. But the problem is that I have the rock here as a saved selection, and I would like to have that interact with my current selection, and I don't know how to do that. Inverting, I don't think inverting would actually help with that. Well, anyway, what I am going to do is make everything here gray. And then, what do I have here? Brownish. Yeah, brownish seems fine. And maybe some yellow. Kind of a, sandstone colored highlight. Then some dark gray for the asphalt. Some very light gray for the stonework here. And here. Now we are getting to the kind of areas where actually using some very well differentiated layers would be helpful, but I think that would be more work than I am actually willing to put into this this project. It's going to take a couple of hours anyway. And I think we're going to want some quite light stones for the for this area here, sort of a viewing platform, I guess. And then again something a bit darker for the blocks here. Getting smaller and smaller. So I think that's again not ideal, but I'm getting some, art fatigue already. It is, but this is a different layer. So when I start drawing the character, I can, turn this down or turn it off entirely. Like this. Hmm. Of course, it's unfortunate that I'm getting fatigued at the foreground here. Ideally, of course, you would like to have the foreground in detail and the background less so. But, it is like it is. It's a demonstration anyway. This is my go-to excuse today. And I imagine for the entire week. I'm actually now starting a new layer. This is a hard light layer. What this does is that I can fill it with a medium gray. It doesn't do anything. But then going up from medium gray, this will make an attempt to produce a highlight. And when I go below medium, it is going to produce a shadow. And you can also use it to add a colored highlight or a colored shadow. This is overlaying the pre-existing colors with the base color. So it's not quite as good as doing it by hand, but a lot faster. The subject, I think you might be able to guess by the dangly bits and the egg ears here. As to what is 35p doing in my site YouTube channel, is that a band or is someone shitposting? I mean, the music is the music that's there is there because I like listening to it. This isn't a you know, deeper meaning to it. So start adding in some highlight here and here. As with the rocks, I am going to airbrush some pattern in and then outline around it to give the impression that I have actually thought about and drawn, you know, a stony wall. And in actuality, I of course have absolutely not done that. Then mix it up with some highlights. Highlights would be somewhere around here. I am pretending that these are stones that are jutting from the wall. So they are mostly going to be in the shadow. They are going to have some highlights from, you know, ambient light and reflection. And again, the shadow is going to fall to the stage right of the character. So her shadow is going to be somewhere around here. And the wall, of course, is going to cast its own shadow. And actually this sidewalk here is going to cast its own shadow as well. We end up with some sort of not really shadow here. And I think we already have most of the highlight there, but I'm going to mess with it a little bit to give it a sort of texture here. And then some shadows around the lines here. Then a whitish midline. Seems fine. Then move into the line work again. Then I am making the outline more blocky and scratchy to give the impression that this is actually now a sort of a constructed stone wall. Then let's do some inlines. Well, actually, I think I might make this into an outline as well. It will be, I think this is going to need to be relatively strong. So, and then let's get into the inlines. Put in some here. Some here. You know what? We are getting into around 3 hours of drawing today. I think that's going to be about enough. I am going to finish this layer, and after that I'm going to finish for today. And then I can use the same drawing as the basis for the demonstration for tomorrow. If I do something that's particularly useful for, character drawing, that's going to be helpful to have a ready composition. And I think I have an excellent idea for it. The time would be probably the same as today. That was 8 a.m. Central European time, so that would be 7 a.m. GMT, and that's probably the easiest for you to convert out of. Or actually, Google is probably going to do a very good job if you just put in 8 a.m. CET, Central European time. So today's demonstration was mostly about, or was supposed to be about layer inheritance and coloring within the lines. Another idea that I've had that I'd like to talk about is, using these cross sections like I did in the gesture drawing for the final cut, and that's something that's quite useful for character drawing. So I could do that tomorrow and use this the sketch from today, and at some point I had the idea of having like a stream series where I'd work on a larger project. It was going to be, Ina's art class with some, probably, self-insert and possibly other, VTuber associates as students. But that was around the time I got burnt out on the scene, so to say. So I never ended up finishing that in any form of way. So maybe this week I will actually manage to finish a larger project. Thank you, Pig. It's nice to be back. Uh, there's something about streaming and even drawing while streaming. You might think that it would be more stressful than just plain drawing, but somehow it isn't. Maybe it's the talking aspect. I am at least talking to myself the entire time, or maybe it's sort of what's the fallacy called? Sunk cost fallacy. So when I'm already logged into an activity, it's it feels harder to stop doing it than it would otherwise. Um, seems to make sense. Makes sense to me at least. There's something to it, even if I can't quite put my finger on why streaming while working has this effect. No, it's interesting with the score test scores there. As many of you might guess, if you don't know, I do a lot of flashcards. Learning foreign languages is my hobby. I don't get paid for learning, for example, living languages or dead languages, but I do it for fun. And I find that reading the cards aloud is quite helpful to me. It takes more time when you mumble them out instead of just doing it in your head, but it feels like there's a positive effect to it. A bit of which outlines would we like to have a sort of that one should be a bit brown, I think. Yeah, it is working. The effect was just very mild. I think at this point I'm going to have to turn the sketch off for a while so that I can tell what's happening down here. It's very systematic of you, Pig. That's the sort of thing that I like to do when sort of doing the first pass in learning a language. I find it annoying and difficult to use flashcards that have English or another foreign language as the starting point. So, and unfortunately, my native language is not quite as large a language area as English. So usually I can't find, ready-made flashcards. So I usually make them myself, and I work through the, uh, I find some material, I work through it, do the exercises and so on. And at that point, I like to analyze a lot as well, try to generalize. And then after that point, when it goes into the flashcard deck, it's kind of, halfway ready thought. Hmm. I'm going to hmm. Oh, oh, messed up a little bit with the colors there. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Probably the most important bits were already said, I imagine. So yeah, I think that analysis is useful for me, at least. I find that some people somehow find it better to just memorize phrases, particularly when they are. I've heard some co-workers complaining about touristy language courses being too academic for them, while on the other side I often find that I would like to have all of the grammar at the start. Ah, thinking in English phenomenon is something that I've run into as well, with some languages that are more similar to mine than English is, or the Germanic languages are. Because the English and German are overwhelmingly my most used foreign languages. So of course, their influence is always there, and in many cases, you don't actually want the effect there. There's the question of long-term learning and short-term learning. I think probably for the people who want that kind of thing, that might be exactly what they want. And if you tried selling, someone who wants to learn tourist phrases, if you try to sell them on actually, deeply learning a language, they might not do it at all. So that's the sort of like with sports. At least with sports, doing something, even if it isn't ideal, is better than doing nothing. When it comes to languages, I'm not quite that certain. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Who knows? So let's see. The inheritance here is working as I want it to. I want it to work somehow, Let's see if these much functions are going to do anything helpful. The wall here is looking a bit too airbrushed for my taste. Let's see if I can. No, there's no color in this layer, so it's this much functions don't actually do anything. I'm going to try some sort of a texture. That's just going to look dirty. I don't think that's quite what I want either. Jack down the opacity. Ah, this is actually with the opacity jacked down. This might be something that I would like to use back here. Oh, it's not going to do anything back there. The stamp water is actually useful in my experience. And of course, the shoujo bubbles are going to be useful for certain purposes. Nice. I guess it's having a positive effect here. I'm going to use the same one on the rocks, stones on this side. I'm only going to jack the opacity down even more. Right down to 10. Yeah, that's probably good. Then really jack it down and just put a bit of that everywhere here in the foreground. I think that's going to have a pretty nice effect. Yeah, that's good enough for now at least. And then I am going to do something with the sea. I'm going to do something with the sea, and then we are going to be done for today. And I am going to get back to the character drawing tomorrow. So something like this, and then getting back to the layer inheritance, we probably want to airbrush some white in the back there again. We get not really a haze effect, but aesthetically similar enough. The sky is more or less finished. I'm going to maybe add in some clouds again at a later date. but the sea is going to be a bit of a different color. I think it's going to be a question of line work again. And then maybe have some stamps on top of everything, or possibly below the outline. Yeah, I think below the outline might be the best place for stamps. Well, in any case, the outline is not going to be that dramatic. It's just going to be around here. Actually, the blocking has to go a little bit higher. Something like this. Yeah, that's looking good. Good enough. I might as well delete that layer since it's not going to be really useful. Easier to delete it than to start erasing, I think. So that's basically going to be the outline. What am I going to do with the inline? I want some sort of a brush here that has a sort of pattern to it. Let's just take all. Let's try this one. Not quite what I wanted. This is of course a classic. I think sort of a signature style. Using this for the coastal surf might be pretty on brand for me. Other than that, I think I'm going to have some amount of very similar structure to the ripples. So for my next trick, I am going to turn all of this white. And you will see that the effect becomes quite mild when you have turned everything white. And then I am going to use some very light blue to glue it back up. This is no longer a group, this is now the highlights. And I am going to basically pull exactly the same trick with the shadows. And then maybe add some stamps, it's gonna make try it out. No? It seems that the my favorite has been a little bit decimated by the update of Krita. Yeah, I guess a postcard is a good description of it. I was thinking of like, character and landscape, but I think postcards are in the same dimensions as we are here. A series. So I'm going to turn all of this white again for the shadows, but then I am going to use sort of, darkish turquoise. No, no, not on this layer. I want it on this layer. So that's looking quite nice. And then let's play around with the stamps a little bit. There's probably going to be some sort of texture brush that's... this might be too large. I don't know, I'm going to group the stamps as well. I'm going to pull exactly the same move. And anyway, if I am supposed to supposedly demonstrating these methods, pulling the same move over and over again is going to be sort of a visual repetition for you as watchers. Might not be a bad thing. So once again, I did this time not in black, but in a dark blue, and I'm going to paint it over with white, so it's a blank canvas, and then I am going to use something with a relatively mild color contrast. Seems fine for now. I think we can get back to this work on the background again sometime later. So let's turn the sketch on for a moment, and I am going to group the sketch. It crashed. Let's hope that I did not that I saved relatively recently, or that the autosave was relatively recently. One moment. So here we are once again. Wasn't that much of a loss again. So what do we have? So some losses um, on the surf here. I am going to redo the... Yeah, that was not what I wanted to do. I'm going to redo the shadows. I liked having those. For tomorrow, I'm going to turn off the... or actually, I already did turn off the reference docker that is apparently known for crashing. So it might have been that was causing the issues. Let's say hopefully it was, because turning it off would free me of the crash menace in that case. And then again, sort of a dark turquoise for the shadows. And then group the stamps again. I think all of the crashes have been around when I've been starting new layers, so there might be some sort of an issue with the layers as well. I'm going to uninstall the Docker in case it's a problem with that. Then getting back to the airbrush. So the highlights are going to be sort of a light turquoise, seem fine, and the shadows are going to be a darker one. And I think that's going to be plenty for today. Let's just put in some white here as a background for our little Miss Sundress. And I've lost my reference, but I think I can manage a deep dark purple even without references. Nope. I don't know, maybe like a nice sand colored sundress. And a straw colored hat. And let's put in some more dark purple here for the flaps. and you know, some orange. No, that's not the right one. This is where having the Docker here would actually be helpful. I think that's going to be enough for today. Oh my. And how unfortunate for you, Attenborough. This mystery was only solved at the very end of this session. So, that has been today. 3.5 hours, 2.5 hours of which working on this project. This is time to end the recording. Thank you to everyone watching afterwards on YouTube.